They thought they were coming for a person. But the second they aimed at you, the whole board rearranged. You weren't just a soldier. They stepped into the battlefield itself. And the battlefield was you. They were ready to run the same plays they've used on others. Scramble your mind, bleed your energy, crack your spirit. But they didn't understand. You've been under fire since childhood. Life's been throwing emotional landmines. Betrayal after betrayal, drought after drought, earthquakes in your own chest. By the time their little candlelight rituals came, you weren't a target, you were terrain. They weren't throwing spears at a person, they were tossing pebbles at a mountain. Your soul was already trained in fire. You didn't meet them with fear or panic. You stood still. And that stillness shook them more than 1,000 curses could. They saw a body that looked tired, silent, maybe even cornered. But your spirit, it was taking every hit, breaking it down, and flipping it back into a snare they couldn't see. They didn't know that the fight wasn't happening in the streets or at their altar. It was inside you. And every time they lost, you didn't swing a blade. Your alignment was the blade. You didn't need to chant a thing. Your presence was the vibration that cut their web. You didn't call an army. You were the army. And because you didn't flex, they thought your silence was weakness. That was their fatal mistake. See, your silence wasn't a tactic. It wasn't some stay calm flex. It was a divine seal. Protection is a shield. A shield is spirit saying, access denied. You weren't just quiet. You were encrypted. They could see you, but they couldn't reach you. They kept throwing rope over a locked gate, not realizing the key they were looking for never existed. They needed you to react, to cuss them out, explain yourself, swing back, anything to tether their spell to. You gave them nothing. And that nothing, it was everything. Because when a real one goes still, it's not absence, it's reordering. And reordering happens above their pay grade. While they were burning herbs and chanting spells, you were becoming the very thing they were chasing. Not using magic, but being it. They had to borrow power from spirits, from symbols, from each other. You just had to breathe. Your strength was earned through pain, through loss, through the hell that forged you. That's the kind of power you can't fake, can't steal, can't buy. They ran in packs because their power was scattered. Yours was whole. They needed numbers, you just needed alignment. And alignment will always eat alliance alive. That's why their attacks collapsed. That's why their energy drained. Because while they were pretending to be unified, you were already one with Source. You didn't just survive what they threw at you, you alchemized it. They came for the flesh but underestimated the covenant. Didn't know your footsteps were synced with ancient guidance, that every scar you carried was etched with divine wisdom. Your name isn't just known, it's registered in realms they can't enter. They tried to drag you into chaos, not knowing you were born in it, and not just born in it, but crowned in it. You didn't learn to fight in peace. You learned to breathe through fire and called it holy when it tried to take you out. You didn't just walk away, you walked through and came out carrying the very thing they were trying to kill. A single flame they couldn't blow out. They needed circles, threads, whispers at 3 a.m. because without each other they'd collapse. Alone they were fragile. Together they were just organized fragility. You, no hype squad, no backup, no one lighting candles on your behalf. You had clarity about who you are, what you carry. And clarity doesn't need to yell. It just is. When someone stands in real clarity, the entire spirit world has to adjust. They were constantly plugging into borrowed power. You were fully charged before the fight even started. They needed crowds because their strength was external. You stood solo because your strength was internal. That's why their numbers didn't shake you. You didn't match their energy. You dissolved it. You didn't echo their noise. You erased it. They were faking divine unity. You carried it naturally in your soul. That's why you couldn't be touched. Not because you got lucky, but because you were whole. And wholeness, that's a weapon no witch, no ritual, no circle can cut through. Every curse they launched ricocheted because you're not just covered, you're encoded. Your boundaries are backed by something they can't decode or dismantle. They circled like wolves, but forgot. Even wolves tremble before lions. You're not prey, you're divine order. And divine order doesn't panic. It watches, it waits. And when it moves, the atmosphere adjusts. You didn't react because you weren't threatened. You were calculating. And by the time they sensed the shift, it was too late. You didn't just walk away. You walked through and came out with the crown they were trying to break. They wanted a war. They didn't realize you are the war. They thought the war would be loud, flames yelling chaos, but your silence was thunder in the spirit. You weren't just resisting. You were rerouting their every strike, turning every spell into seed, every attack into oil. They played in shadows, but you carried light that exposes. That's why they scattered, not because you shouted, because you saw. Discernment cut deeper than any dagger they could conjure. And in the end, it wasn't a battle, it was a revealing. Stay dangerous.